Imagine this, an 18-year-old girl untouched by the world's chaos, living a life so ordinary it was almost invisible. But fate had other plans. One fateful encounter, one lingering gaze from the most powerful tycoon in the city, and her life was forever changed. This isn't just a story of love or obsession. It's a story of power, secrets, and a passion so intense it could burn down empires. By the end of this video, you'll uncover the truth behind this mysterious connection, the hidden forces at play, and the shocking twists that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, desire, and destiny. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like your life was on the brink of something extraordinary? Like there was a force out there waiting to pull you into a world you never imagined? That's exactly where our story begins. At 18, she was just a girl naive, innocent, and untouched by the darker sides of life. But when he walked into her world, everything changed. He wasn't just any man, he was the man. The tycoon who controlled empires, the man whose name alone could make people tremble. And for reasons no one could understand, he became utterly fixated on her. But here's the thing, this isn't your typical love story. This is a tale of obsession, of secrets, and of a passion so dangerous it could destroy them both. Why her? What was it about this ordinary girl that captivated the most powerful man in the city? Was it her innocence? Her defiance? Or was there something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface that even she didn't know about? As we dive into this story, I want you to think about the choices you've made in your own life. The moments that changed everything. Because this story isn't just about them, it's about you. It's about the power of desire, the weight of secrets, and the choices that define who we are. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be asking yourself, what would I have done in her shoes? Now, let's set the stage. Picture a city that never sleeps, where power is the ultimate currency and secrets are the deadliest weapons. In this world, our tycoon reigns supreme. He's the kind of man who gets what he wants, no matter the cost. But when he meets her, something shifts. For the first time, he's not in control. And that's where the real story begins. But here's the twist. There's more to this story than meets the eye. As we peel back the layers, you'll discover that nothing is as it seems. The tycoon's obsession? It's not just about her. There's a deeper game at play, one that involves betrayal, hidden agendas, and a past that refuses to stay buried. And as for our heroine, she's not as innocent as she appears. There's a fire in her, a strength she doesn't even know she has. And when push comes to shove, she'll have to make a choice that will change everything. So here's my promise to you. By the end of this video, you'll have the answers you've been searching for. But be warned, this story isn't for the faint of heart. It's raw, it's real, and it's going to challenge everything you thought you knew about love, power, and the lengths people will go to get what they want. But before we go any further, I want you to do something for me. Take a moment and think about the most pivotal moment in your life. The moment that changed everything. Got it? Good. Because as we unravel this story, I want you to keep that moment in mind. Because this story isn't just about them, it's about you. It's about the choices we make, the secrets we keep, and the power of desire to change our lives forever. Now, let's dive in. But remember, once you start this journey, there's no turning back. The truth is waiting, and it's more shocking than you could ever imagine. So, are you ready? Let's begin. Pause for effect, then lower your voice slightly. But before we get to the heart of the story, there's something you need to know. This isn't just a tale of passion and power. It's a story about the darkness that lies within us all. And as we uncover the truth, you'll start to see the cracks in the facade. The lies, the betrayals, the secrets that could destroy everything. So here's the question. How far would you go for love? For power? For the truth? Because in this story, the stakes are higher than you can imagine. And by the time we're done, you'll be left with one burning question. What would you have done? End on a cliffhanger with a dramatic pause, but that's just the beginning. The real story? It's about to unfold. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Cut to the next scene, leaving the audience eager for more. The city where our story unfolds is a place of glittering skyscrapers and shadowed alleyways where fortunes are made and lost in the blink of an eye. It's a world where power is the ultimate currency, and those who wield it are both revered and feared. At the heart of this world is Alexander Kane, the tycoon whose name is synonymous with success, ambition, and an almost mythical level of influence. He's the kind of man who commands attention the moment he walks into a room, his presence as magnetic as it is intimidating. But beneath the polished exterior lies a man driven by something darker, something even he can't fully understand. And then there's her Elena Carter, the girl who seemed to appear out of nowhere, a quiet enigma in a world that thrives on noise. At 18, she was a blank slate, untouched by the chaos of the city. Her innocence a stark contrast to the cutthroat world Alexander ruled. But innocence, as it turns out, can be the most dangerous weapon of all. Elena's life before Alexander was simple, almost mundane. She lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city with her mother, a woman who had worked tirelessly to provide for them but whose health was failing. Elena spent her days working part-time jobs and her nights dreaming of a life beyond the confines of her reality. She was a girl with no connections, no power, and no reason to cross paths with someone like Alexander Kane. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Their first meeting was anything but ordinary. It happened at a charity gala, an event Elena had only attended because her best friend, Mia, had begged her to come. Mia, who worked as a junior event planner, had managed to sneak them in, promising Elena it would be a night to remember. And it was just not in the way either of them expected. Alexander noticed Elena the moment she walked into the room. It wasn't her beauty that caught his attention. Though she was undeniably striking, it was something else. Something he couldn't quite put into words. There was a quiet strength in her, a resilience that seemed to radiate from her very core. And for a man who had spent his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him, Elena's indifference was both infuriating and intoxicating. He approached her that night, his charm on full display, but Elena was unimpressed. She didn't know who he was, and even if she had, it wouldn't have mattered. To her, he was just another man in a room full of them. But Alexander wasn't used to being ignored, and that single interaction sparked something in him, an obsession that would soon consume them both. What followed was a whirlwind of events that neither of them could have predicted. Alexander began showing up in places Elena frequented, his presence both thrilling and unnerving. He sent her gifts, extravagant and unnecessary, each one accompanied by a note that hinted at his growing fascination. At first, Elena tried to ignore him, convinced that his interest would fade as quickly as it had begun. But Alexander wasn't a man who gave up easily. He was used to getting what he wanted, and what he wanted was Elena. As their paths continued to cross, Elena found herself drawn to him in ways she couldn't explain. There was something about Alexander that was impossible to resist, a magnetism that pulled her in even as her instincts warned her to stay away. But the more she got to know him, the more she realized that there was more to Alexander than the public persona he so carefully cultivated. Behind the confident exterior was a man haunted by his past, a man who carried secrets so dark they threatened to destroy him. And Elena, with her quiet strength and unwavering empathy, became the one person he couldn't hide from. But their connection didn't go unnoticed. In a world where power is everything, Alexander's obsession with Elena became the subject of whispers and speculation. There were those who saw her as a threat, a weakness that could be exploited. Among them was Victoria Blackwood, Alexander's ex-fiancée, and a woman who had never quite gotten over their breakup. Victoria was everything Elena wasn't: polished, calculating, and fiercely ambitious. She had spent years building a life that revolved around Alexander, and the thought of losing him to someone like Elena was more than she could bear. Victoria wasn't the only one watching. There were others, people with their own agendas who saw Elena as a pawn in a much larger game. And then there was Elena's best friend, Mia, who had her own reasons for wanting to keep Elena close. Mia had always been protective of Elena, but as Alexander's presence in her life grew, so did Mia's unease. She knew more about Alexander's world than she let on, and the more she saw of him, the more convinced she became that Elena was in over her head. As the weeks turned into months, the lines between love and obsession began to blur. Alexander's feelings for Elena deepened, but so did his need to control her. He wanted to protect her from the dangers of his world, but his methods were often heavy-handed, leaving Elena feeling trapped rather than cherished. And Elena, for all her strength, found herself struggling to reconcile her growing feelings for Alexander with the reality of who he was. She loved him, but she also feared him, and the tension between those two emotions threatened to tear her apart. But just when it seemed like their relationship might implode under the weight of its own intensity, a new threat emerged, one that would force them to confront the secrets they had been hiding from each other. It started with a series of anonymous messages, cryptic warnings that hinted at a danger neither of them saw coming. At first, they dismissed them as the work of a jealous rival, but as the messages grew more sinister, it became clear that they were dealing with something far more dangerous. Someone was watching them, someone who knew things about their pasts that even they didn't know. And as the pieces of the puzzle began to come together, Elena and Alexander found themselves drawn into a web of lies, betrayal, and revenge that would test the limits of their love and their sanity. The stakes were higher than ever, and the clock was ticking. But as they raced to uncover the truth, one question loomed over everything. Who could they trust? In a world where everyone had an agenda, the answer was far from clear. And as the shadows closed in around them, Elena and Alexander realized that the greatest threat might not be from the outside, but from within. But that's just the beginning. The real story? It's about to unfold. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The anonymous messages continued to arrive, each one more chilling than the last. They were no longer just cryptic warnings. They were explicit threats, detailing secrets that Elena and Alexander had thought were buried forever. The sender knew about Alexander's past, his rise to power, the deals he had made, the people he had destroyed along the way. They knew about Elena's mother, her fragile health, and the debts that had forced Elena to take on multiple jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. But most disturbingly, they knew about the night Alexander and Elena had met, the night that had set everything in motion. It was as if someone had been watching them from the very beginning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Elena tried to stay calm, but the fear was starting to consume her. She had always been strong, but this was different. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone she cared about. Alexander, on the other hand, was furious. He wasn't used to feeling powerless, and the fact that someone could get this close to him, to them, was a blow to his pride as much as it was a threat to their safety. He doubled down on his efforts to protect Elena, hiring private investigators and tightening security, but it only seemed to make things worse. The more he tried to control the situation, the more it spiraled out of his grasp. Meanwhile, Victoria Blackwood was growing increasingly desperate. She had always seen Elena as a threat, but now she realized that Elena was more than just a rival. She was the key to destroying Alexander. Victoria had spent years building a network of allies within Alexander's inner circle, people who were loyal to her and not him. She began to reach out to them, planting seeds of doubt about Alexander's leadership and his obsession with Elena. She knew that if she could turn enough people against him, she could take everything he had built, and maybe even take him down in the process. But Victoria wasn't the only one with a plan. Mia, Elena's best friend, had been quietly gathering information of her own. She had always been suspicious of Alexander, and the more she learned about his past, the more convinced she became that Elena was in danger. Mia had her own reasons for wanting to protect Elena, reasons that went beyond friendship. She had been keeping a secret, one that could change everything if it came to light. But as much as she wanted to tell Elena the truth, she knew that now wasn't the time. The stakes were too high and the risks were too great. As the tension between Elena and Alexander grew, so did the cracks in their relationship. Alexander's need to control everything was pushing Elena away, and she found herself questioning whether she could truly trust him. She loved him, but she also knew that love wasn't always enough. And then there were the messages, the constant reminders that someone out there wanted to destroy them. Elena began to feel like she was living in a nightmare, one where she couldn't trust anyone, not even herself. But just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, the unexpected happened. Elena received a package, delivered to her apartment in the middle of the night. Inside was a single photograph, one that made her blood run cold. It was a picture of her mother, taken recently, with a note attached. "You can't protect her." "But I can." The message was clear. Whoever was behind this wasn't just threatening Elena and Alexander. They were threatening everyone Elena loved. Alexander was furious when he found out. He had always known that his world was dangerous, but he had never imagined that it would put Elena's family at risk. He vowed to do whatever it took to keep them safe, even if it meant stepping away from Elena entirely. But Elena wasn't willing to let him go that easily. She knew that they were stronger together, and she was determined to fight for their relationship, no matter the cost. As they dug deeper into the mystery, they began to uncover clues that pointed to someone they had never suspected. The messages, the threats, the photograph, they all seemed to lead back to someone from Alexander's past, someone he had thought was long gone. But the truth was far more complicated than they could have imagined. The person behind the threats wasn't just an enemy. They were a ghost, a shadow from Alexander's past that had come back to haunt him. And then, just when they thought they were closing in on the truth, the unthinkable happened. Elena disappeared. One moment she was there, and the next she was gone, leaving behind nothing but a single clue, a note that read, "If you want her back, you'll have to face the truth." Alexander was devastated, but he knew that this was the moment he had been dreading. The game had changed, and the stakes were higher than ever. But here's the thing. This isn't just a story about love and obsession. It's a story about the choices we make and the secrets we keep. It's about the lengths we'll go to protect the people we love, and the price we're willing to pay for the truth. And as Alexander races against time to find Elena, he realizes that the greatest threat might not be from the outside, but from within. But that's just the beginning. The real story? It's about to unfold. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The city was cloaked in darkness as Alexander Kane raced against time, his mind a whirlwind of fear and determination. Every second that passed felt like an eternity, the weight of Elena's disappearance pressing down on him like a suffocating shadow. He had always been a man of action, someone who thrived under pressure, but this was different. This wasn't about power or control. This was about love, about the one person who had managed to break through the walls he had spent a lifetime building. And now she was gone, taken by someone who knew exactly how to hurt him. The note she left behind, "If you want her back, you'll have to face the truth," haunted him, its words echoing in his mind like a relentless drumbeat. What truth? What was he missing? As Alexander delved deeper into the mystery, he began to piece together fragments of a puzzle he hadn't even known existed. The clues led him to a name he hadn't heard in years, Daniel Hartman, a former business partner who had vanished after a deal gone wrong. Daniel had been more than just a colleague. He had been a friend, someone Alexander had trusted implicitly. But their partnership had ended in betrayal, with Daniel disappearing after embezzling millions from their company. Alexander had assumed Daniel was dead, lost to the shadows of his own guilt. But now it seemed Daniel was very much alive, and he had been planning his revenge for years. The realization hit Alexander like a punch to the gut. Daniel wasn't just after money or power. He wanted to destroy everything Alexander had built, to make him feel the same pain he had felt when Alexander had turned his back on him. And Elena innocent. Unknowing, Elena had become the perfect pawn in his twisted game. But Alexander wasn't about to let Daniel win. He had lost too much already, and he wasn't going to lose Elena too. Meanwhile, Elena found herself in a dimly lit room, her hands bound and her mind racing. She had been taken in the dead of night, snatched from the safety of her apartment by faceless men who had moved with military precision. At first, she had been terrified, her thoughts consumed by images of her mother and Alexander. But as the hours passed, a strange calm settled over her. She had always been a fighter, and she wasn't about to let fear paralyze her now. She began to piece together what little information she had, trying to understand who had taken her and why. When Daniel finally appeared, his face a mask of cold satisfaction, Elena felt a surge of defiance. She didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but she wasn't going to let him break her. Daniel's plan was as ruthless as it was calculated. He had spent years watching Alexander, studying his every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And Elena, beautiful, untouchable Elena, had been the key to it all. By taking her, he had not only hurt Alexander but also exposed the one weakness the tycoon had never allowed himself to have. But Daniel hadn't counted on Elena's strength, her ability to see through his facade and recognize the pain that drove him. As they talked, Elena began to understand that Daniel wasn't just a villain. He was a man broken by betrayal, someone who had lost everything and was desperate to make someone else feel that same loss. Back in the city, Alexander was closing in. With the help of Mia, who had finally revealed the secret she had been keeping her connection to Daniel through a past relationship, Alexander was able to track down Daniel's hideout. But as he prepared to confront his old friend, he was forced to confront something else, the truth about his own past. The betrayal that had driven Daniel to this point hadn't been one-sided. Alexander had played his part, making choices that had destroyed lives and left scars that had never healed. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was one Alexander knew he had to face if he was going to save Elena and put an end to the nightmare once and for all. The final confrontation was a clash of wills, a battle not just of strength but of truth and redemption. Alexander and Daniel faced off in a tense, emotionally charged standoff, each man forced to confront the choices that had brought them to this moment. Elena, caught in the middle, became the voice of reason, urging them to see beyond their pain and recognize the humanity in each other. It was a moment of reckoning, one that left all three of them forever changed. In the end, Daniel's plan unraveled, not because of Alexander's power or Elena's defiance, but because of the truth. The truth that had been buried for so long, the truth that had driven Daniel to the edge and forced Alexander to confront the man he had become. It was a truth that hurt, but it was also a truth that set them free. Daniel, realizing the futility of his revenge, stepped back from the edge, his anger giving way to a weary acceptance. Alexander, humbled by the experience, vowed to make amends for the mistakes of his past. And Elena, stronger than ever, emerged from the ordeal with a newfound understanding of the power of love and forgiveness. But just when it seemed like the story was over, there was one final twist. As Alexander and Elena walked away from the wreckage of the past, they were approached by a stranger, a woman who introduced herself as Daniel's sister. She had a story of her own, one that revealed a deeper layer of the mystery. Daniel hadn't acted alone. He had been manipulated by someone else, someone who had been pulling the strings from the shadows. The revelation was a shock, but it was also a reminder that the past was never truly buried, and that the choices we make have consequences that ripple far beyond our own lives. The story ends not with a neat resolution, but with a sense of hope and possibility. Alexander and Elena, scarred but unbroken, begin to rebuild their lives, their love stronger for having been tested. Daniel, facing the consequences of his actions, begins to find a path toward redemption. And the stranger, with her own story to tell, becomes a symbol of the interconnectedness of our lives. A reminder that no one is truly alone. As the screen fades to black, the audience is left with a final thought. Life is a tapestry of choices, each one shaping the story we tell. And in the end, it's not the power we wield or the secrets we keep that define us. It's the love we give, the truth we face, and the courage to keep moving forward, no matter how dark the road may seem. But that's not the end. The real story? It's just beginning. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.